Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best contributors to our independent policy movement for progress to bring power to people like you. Today on the program, we're going to be interviewing a congressional candidate once again. We're going to be talking with Jim Kennedy. He's running in Florida's 8th District. And in today's conversation, we talked about his, design philosophy of how he tries to create legislation, the top priorities of his campaign, and a lot about specifically how healthcare was his inspiration for running for office. And we finally talked about how we properly do crisis management and incentivize politicians to try and put the people first at the end of the day. So with that being said, we got a lot of exciting parts. So come with us when we go into part one as we learn more about Jim Kennedy. Okay, we're live. Hey, we are here with our guest. We have Jim Kennedy from the Florida's 8th District. Jim, welcome to the program.
John, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So in this first part, I wanted to really focus in on getting to know you better as an individual. I think for a lot of people out there, it can kind of seem like a crazy endeavor trying to run for office. And so they have to know, what are those type of people that get into it? As I alluded to in our intro, you are a Navy veteran and an engineer and scientist. What took you away from that and said, I have to start running for office?
Honestly, a motorcycle accident. A few years back, I was between jobs. As you know, all engineers know, we get laid off. I was about to start a new job. I had about 3 weeks of health insurance gap between my layoff and all that, and the new one. And Cobra was $3,000 for those 3 weeks. And I'm like, what's going to happen? Well, I crashed my motorcycle, put myself in the hospital, put myself in a wheelchair for months, and I had no health insurance. So during that time, I saw how close people are. Now, here I am, an engineer, a scientist. My wife's a nurse. It took us 2 years, maybe a little bit more, to finally pay off all that debt. So in that time that I was not working in a wheelchair, I started doing research. If we were so close to the edge, how many people are? And as I learned more and more, I couldn't stand that government wasn't doing more for Americans. And I just couldn't go back to just being a regular engineer, just going back to the Space Center and working, because people need someone to speak up for them. And that's what I felt I had to do. I don't know, it's kind of a little corny, but I see so many things wrong. And there are these lifetime politicians. We need regular people back in Congress. That's the whole point of the House, is to have, it's the everyman, every woman person. That's supposed to be that the idea of the House was, as opposed to these career politicians. And so it just motivated me, and my engineer side kicked in, and I just did more and more research. I started really getting into it, and I talked to my wife. We decided that it was worth the jump, and here we are today.
Yeah. I think it's so important that it kind of comes from that personal experience. I think that's really the eye-opening moment of just how big of a crisis it is. And you're right, so many people come close to the edge. It's our number one cause of bankruptcy. 40% of bankruptcy comes from medical health expenditures. So I have to ask, coming from this kind of military background and of service, what do you think is really that role that a congressional official is supposed to represent? Is it truly supposed to just be a representation of the people? Is it supposed to be a leader who drives forward a thought of what the country should be? What do you define as the true responsibility of the role you're running for?
Well, as for the House, it is the title is representative, and you are supposed to represent the people of your district. Now, obviously, you're going to have both extremes. You're going to have far to one side, far to the other side, and you need to listen to both of them, which most don't. They'll only listen to their base. As an engineer and in the military, you always listen to all views. You always made sure you got all the data before you make a decision, and that's what I believe we should be doing. So using science, listening to the experts, using the office of congressmen to bring the weight and the resources of the U.S. government to determine what is the best resource, what is, excuse me, the best outcome for this district and the country as a whole as things get pushed up in different issues. So obviously you're not specifically just focusing on issues that are local, but healthcare for all. We want to. I'm running for universal healthcare. I'm personally experienced with not having healthcare. I
Yeah.
know how close it is. And I was very lucky because the VA picked up my rehabilitation as a disabled vet. So a congressional representative does need to be the voice of their people. They need to be one of the residents of that area that speaks to DC as an everyman, as a every person, I guess I should be saying now, and they need to bring that ideas in that hometown logic, that Main Street thinking to DC. Once you get higher up, the ideas get higher up, but at the representative level, it needs to be the people's voice, and I think that's just really lacking a little, not a little bit, a lot.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. That is, in the name itself, it is supposed to be a representative of the people. I will admit the crowd will not always be right, but it is our job, I think, to personally follow them. And when we disagree with them, we should be making the case to try and sway their mind over time.
Mhm.
And I'd love to ask you, after you had left the Navy, you became a designer for, boating. And I wanted to ask you, as a designer, are there any design principles that you think need to be brought to how we create solutions for this country?
Yes, most definitely. Just as any engineer would say, you need to listen to the other disciplines. You do need to listen to more. My basis is electrical. I'm an electrical engineer by degree, base degree. So starting from there, yes, in some situations I might be the subject matter expert on the electrical. I'm not going to be from mechanical, and just because something works electrically, it might not physically fit there. We need to start listening to each other. We need to reach across the aisle, and you need to listen to opposing views. I sound like I'm repeating myself, but this is how engineering works. We put an idea up there and then we review it. We review it from all different sides, find what's wrong, find what's working, find what isn't working, and then go back at it. Not just, pick one idea and run with it, with no changes and it's the only thing. So having that, the military, we always talk, and as an engineer, you always listen to other disciplines, because you can't sit in that echo chamber that unfortunately I see a lot of politicians sitting in.
Okay. And, I want to ask you one more question before we go into our second part to talk through some of these policies. I wanted to ask you a little bit of more of a fun question. Obviously, we talked through some of how your profession has influenced your way of wanting to represent. But I wanted to ask you, outside of work, what are some of those hobbies you try to find time to do while you were either in the Navy or as a designer of boats?
Well, as a designer of boats, when I worked for one company, we were allowed to take the boats out and the prototypes, which was fun. Sometimes we ended up dead in the water; they weren't working, and we had to get back. But the Navy's a whole nother life. I probably shouldn't say what some of our hobbies were when I was young and stupid in the Navy. I was just enlisted, so we'd just travel around the world and try to get through life as best we can, and enjoy it, see what we could. As a rocket scientist now, I love it. I love what I do. I honestly do. You know, for other hobbies, I'm a dad. I got young kids, so my hobbies are their hobbies. So there's swimming, there's sports, there's gymnastics coming up. Once COVID hopefully gets us back to doing those things. So other than that, my quiet time is reading. I love reading. I usually try to do 2 books at a time. One more work related. So For All Americans is the one I'm reading right now. It's about the healthcare and Obamacare, Affordable Care Act, and then I'll read Lloyd Alexander. I'll read Brandon Sanderson, something just fun and light, just to take my mind off things for a few hours.
Yeah, I think that's very important. We have to take the time to continue to grow ourselves even beyond what we do professionally, and also have that quality time with those we love. So thank you so much for kind of letting us get to know you. We're going to be right back where we're going to be talking in part 2 with Jim about what are the top policies of his campaign, what he looks to build off of, and what he wants to try and bring that's uniquely his own. So join us in part 2 where we're going to talk shop on what his policy agenda is.
See you then.
Okay, we are back. We're in part 2 now of our conversation. We were just talking with Jim Kennedy, who is running for the 8th District in Florida, about, getting to know who he is, his background, and how he thinks about the office of representative and what it means to him. Now we're going to be talking in the second part about his policy agenda. In part 1, it was very clear, Jim, that you alluded to healthcare being the primary driver of what got you into running for office. And so I'd love to ask you, can we go through what that healthcare solution that you're looking to bring forward is?
Well, I'll be honest. When I first started this, I was looking for more of an access, more of a, I guess you could probably say, similar to Pete Buttigieg. Another one of my big points starting off was veterans benefits. Now, I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong, and I'm starting to see this universal healthcare as a much better, it can do so much more, especially, and it's been highlighted so well in a horrible way by the COVID crisis. If we had a system in place before, we wouldn't have had these issues. Healthcare should not be, a political issue. It really shouldn't. It shouldn't be an employment issue. And so with my platform, we've been looking at it, and we came to realize we don't have a healthcare system of any kind in this country. We have an insurance system. Healthcare is a commodity that is bought and sold by politicians and healthcare agencies. It is not, it has the patient, the end user is not the focus of any of our systems. It's an insurance system. It's how much can they get from you to give to shareholders and how little can they give back. And that's wrong. It's not a commodity that can be bought and sold. So I'm for a universal healthcare for all. If you're working, your work should help the government pay for that. If you're not working, you got to be on the government. And I'm originally from Massachusetts. All children are insured up there. Why can't we do that across the whole country? Why can't we do that for everyone? It's very simple. Now, when you start getting away from everybody being, these risk pools and everything, it does dilute it. The argument by Republicans is that, well, Obamacare drove prices up. No, Obamacare showed, the Affordable Care Act just shined a light on the crooked system. And now you're seeing, because everybody was getting dumped, now so you have these risk pools. And that's what's trying to save those people. I mean, how many people, pre-existing conditions, they were trying to make that, anybody with diabetes gone. You're just gone. And type 1, type 2.
Yeah, it's like when you kick these people out of these risk pools, it doesn't make the risk go away. It's just simply saying we're not accepting it on our bottom line. And we know that this is something that's going to help our society in generally by keeping more and more people healthy, as we've seen, as you just alluded to, during this COVID crisis. And so I'd love to just drill down a little bit. Sure. Universal healthcare, it can frankly have some different definitions. And so I'd love to hear, is it more of a Medicare for all single payer style solution? Or are you looking for something that's more of like a single payer plus, which is basically the same thing except for no duplicative coverage band? Like what is your solution in an ideal way looking like?
I don't have I should say my issue with Medicare for all is the name. It's literally the sales of it. Yeah. Growing up, Medicare was always associated with older people. It was always associated with substandard care. So to me, when people say Medicare for all, I think it's just bad marketing. The idea of what it is, a universal healthcare system for everyone in America, that's what I'm for. That's, if there might be more than one way to do it. I don't know. I'm not a healthcare expert. But there needs to be a way for everybody in the United States to be on healthcare. If they don't make money, they should be on healthcare. If they're not employed, you shouldn't be losing your healthcare when you lose your job. There needs to be, and that's how I see a universal. Everyone is covered. There's different methods for each one. I think you call it the single payer plus, where you have a little bit, there are some options in there, but being able to, there should never be an option. There should never be a point where someone is out of healthcare. And with the Medicare for all, I know it's what people, most people, I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people want. I just don't like the marketing of it, because to me, Medicare is, why I lost my grandmother. She had Medicare. It wasn't much. And the healthcare wasn't that great because she was on Medicare. So I think a lot of people still have that stigma in their head. So to me, it's just a marketing thing that I wish just is. Some people just, you just need a better marketing team.
Yeah.
And but the idea of it, where no matter who you are, you have health insurance. If you're here in America, if you're an American citizen, yes, doom, you're done.
Yeah, Jim, I think we see very eye to eye on this issue, both on the strategy as well as kind of this approach that we try to want to have everyone get covered. First, to that strategy point, I think you're so right that it's bad marketing because, one, the services offered and the prices that are being offered in the bill isn't Medicare. It's a completely different amount. It's expanded coverage and it's for cheaper rates. Yes, it's an improved Medicare. The Medicare administration would still be administering it, but it's not that poor quality of coverage that you currently describe. And furthermore, we can deny this reality all we want as progressives, but old people vote more often, and Medicare is a benefit that they already have. So when you say Medicare for all, they're like thinking, okay, so everyone else is now getting this thing I already have, and I'm going to have to pay for it. I don't know about
Yeah,
that.
it's a straight
Right.
up marketing, and I'm not a marketing executive, but I mean, to me, it's that, those, the Super Bowl commercials, right away which ones are going to work and which ones aren't. And to me, that I like the idea. It's just, you can't call it that. There's too much stigma.
I
Like
agree with you there.
we go through. I'm sure you go through this because we're very progressive. You can't say green to a bunch of Republicans.
Yeah.
When I'm at an NRA meeting or something like that, I can't say global warming. You got to say, well, climate change and
Trigger warning.
carbon. Yeah,
Or it's like
you
it's
got to.
economically efficient to not have pollution in our areas. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can go around it and talk in people's language. And I
Yes.
think you're right that this is just bad marketing. But to the policy point, I actually think it's a very reasonable approach. Let's just make sure everyone has health care. Like, I feel like there's a little bit, sometimes too much concern on sometimes the left of trying to abolish healthcare from the private market compared to just making sure everyone has it. Because I think that's the first step. You could just focus on getting everyone in. I kind of see it like public school. Everyone should be funding into it. Everyone should have access and be able to attend it. But if you want to go send your kids and spend more money to get private school, I don't think we should be stopping you. And
That's an interesting analogy. I like that analogy.
The basic approach for single payer plus. But, now I wanted to talk a little bit more. There's obviously a ton of other policy concerns. As we've seen, there are crises on top of crises, and we just alluded to climate change as one of them. What would you consider those top priorities that you're going to be looking to push forward, like the numbers, 2 through 5?
Well, for obviously, we've talked to a lot of people in our district. In my district, it's a very large district. It goes from, it's Orange, parts of Orange County, it's Brevard County, and it's Indian River County. So I'm like half of the east coast of Florida. It seems like at times, especially the mileage on my car as I'm getting around talking to people. So we, one thing that's a big concern for them here is climate change, because we have, it's called the Indian River Lagoon, and at the moment it is green. We have toxic algae blooms there constantly. But we also have to look at it in the bigger picture. If we don't deal with global climate issues, we're not going to be a lagoon. We're just going to be a deeper part in a bay. Florida, with Louisiana are some of the most at-risk states for climate change, especially, I work on the Space Center. We've literally increased the dune size to protect all the Space Center did. Not me. I'm not out there with a shovel. The dune size to stop the ocean from encroaching on our launch pads. I mean, NASA knows it's coming. Here you're talking about some of the smartest people on the planet. I mean, NASA knows what they're doing. So climate change is a huge thing for us, for me. And it's also very personal to everyone here, because everybody here fishes. They go out on the water. It's Florida. I mean, we get sun all year round. So that's what we do. Another big issue, or like I had said before, originally I started off more on Veterans Affairs, which is still very near and dear to my heart. But talking to people, and since COVID, economic recovery, the CARES Act was a great band-aid. It was a great relief. We needed it. I don't think it was executed great. I think a lot of people, there was some pork barrel in it on both sides, more on the red team, but people needed that, and thank goodness Governor DeSantis here in Florida finally okayed another $300 weekly for people, because Florida unemployment is ridiculous. It's $275 a week. It doesn't matter how many people are in your family, doesn't matter how much you made before, $275 a week. That's it. So the CARES Act was a relief. We need recovery. One of the things I'm working on, it's called the Fight to Unite Initiative. And this would be a full vocational, think of it like an AmeriCorps thing. People would be trained. It would be money invested in infrastructure projects here in America. So any of the money, it's not going out to any into other countries or any outside entities, or just straight into people's pockets. It's bridges, it's homes, it's housing for the needy, and it's built by Americans, and it's people that want a job. They'll go get trained to be a carpenter, a nurse, a plumber, electrician, all these different things that vocations were missing again. Everybody's like college, college, college. And I'm like, well, trust me, my plumber makes more than I do, because I know how much it costs when he shows up every time my kids flush a toy down the toilet. So that's another big thing for us, is a true economic recovery, and that can build across the whole country. Green initiatives. Another one I'm working with is called Bratum Energies. This is a carbon negative solution. This is gasification on a molecular level, to where they can take everything except metal and glass, or sand, silicate, any carbon-based element. So the more plastic, the better. And they can generate energy. They can generate fuel. They can generate biofuels. They can turn it. They break it basically down into carbon dioxide, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and then they recombine it however you want, including as diesel fuel if you want, or natural gas to run your house, your stoves and your heaters. This technology now exists, and the company is just a few miles down the coast from us. So why aren't we doing this? All those biosolids, and it gives off like 10,000 liters of water per year. That's it's not quite potable yet, but it could be stepped there. So these are the initiatives I'd like to see brought forward, because they're jobs. These are jobs here. They're green jobs, and they're renewable. So why aren't we investing in this? The technology's there. It's going to cost somebody more than, the heat rate of these is, a little bit higher than your typical coal furnace. So
yeah, I think those all kind of go hand in hand together in a lot of respects. I truly see climate change being kind of our economic solution out of this crisis, as you just alluded to as well. So, we'll be right back. I want to talk in our third part with Jim today about the strategy of how we get this agenda done, and, what is the proper leadership style approach when we are facing crises in our country. As we started to allude to, we have some of the solutions on the board, but I wanted to know what he would be trying to do when he's on the inside. So stick tuned. We'll be back in part 3 to be able to talk about his leadership style and what the tactics of his agenda is going to take. Okay, we're back in our third part now with Jim Kennedy, who's running for Florida's 8th Congressional District. So far, we've talked with Jim about his background, his philosophy to governing, as well as some of the top priorities of his campaign. Now, in our third part, we want to talk through some of the tactics of how we can start getting this agenda accomplished. And so the first thing I wanted to touch on is something we kind of left off on in our second part, which is managing crises. And so we were talking about beforehand about some of the benefits of the CARES Act. We acknowledged that there are some flaws and meat that was added to it that maybe we weren't as big fans of. I'd love to ask you, what would have been your approach had you been in Congress? What would you have been looking to try and do legislatively to try and improve upon that bill?
First, I would ask Trump what he wanted, and then do the opposite. So I think that'd be the simplest way. I don't like, as an engineer, you don't want excess. We're always looking at reducing costs. And, that's something Republicans always say they want to do, yet they'll add in billions. What did some of these things have to do with COVID relief? Nothing. but they knew they could get it through at this time. And that's both parties, unfortunately. So I would have liked to see a much more stripped down, let's target the individual, let's target small business, let's close these loopholes. Look, I understand we need this in a rush, but why don't we not talk to a lawyer beforehand, talk to a few accountants, and try and close some of these loopholes that the system was putting in there that we knew were going to be exploited right away. Everybody could see it coming, but it just got rushed through. And Congress needs to sit down and start working through these in a realistic way. I mean, you look after the 1920s, the stock market crashed, right? And then the president put Joe Kennedy in charge of the stock market. And everybody's like, why are you putting him? Well, he knows where all the loopholes are. He knows where to close. You're putting the fox in charge of the henhouse. Well, the fox knows where to get into the henhouse. He already made his money. Let the villain, tell you, like it's like you ask code breakers to break your website. You don't ask me to do it. So there's so many taking the time and actually working these things out and being open about it, being public about it. So the American people can start trusting the government again would be where I would start.
Okay. So I'd love to ask you in, trying to break up these bills, because I agree with you. Frankly, we try to put forward these huge bills that have a lot of different facets, and it kind of leaves nearly everyone a little dissatisfied to it. How do you think we can actually start encouraging Congress to have, more streamlined legislation? Because I think this has been a problem that we've been hearing for, frankly, decades, and it seems like it's not been improving. What do you think is the approach to start getting streamlined legislation?
I think one of the first things is to get the career politicians out, to get people who's make their money being a politician. It's ridiculous. Now, look, being someone, you got to remember these people are famous. They are going to make money. They are running the biggest our country in the world, the biggest GDP. So they are going to make money. But you need to give an incentive and you need to give a chance to get more everyday Americans back in there. As I said in the first section, the hurdles you need to be a congressperson is very low. It's like 25. You don't have to be born here. That's only the president. You've just got to be a resident for 8 years. So they're trying to get the every person, sorry, back in there. And by getting these career politicians who they're bought and sold, I'm sorry, it's just they're more concerned with reelection than they are with the people, and that's wrong. We need to get regular people, regular everyday Americans back involved in government so people can trust it again. And I think that's going to be, term limits is a big thing for me because I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. I'm not interested in that. I'm a nerd. I really like my nerd things, right? So I would love to.
I love to hear that, frankly, that it's, I want to get in there, get stuff done, and then leave. And I think you're absolutely right. Term limits is a part of that. One of the big things we focus on here at the Hill of Roses is, frankly, democracy reform and government reform. And then you were talking about the incentivization to these politicians to do the right thing. What do you think needs to be done reform-wise to either our government or our democracy to start encouraging politicians to more likely represent people?
We need to get money out of it. We need to overturn Citizens United some way. Corporations should not be voting and deciding who the American politicians are because they're always going to choose in their best interest. They're always going to go for their shareholders, not even their employees. So that needs to be addressed. Campaign finance laws need to be restricted. I could not believe how, when I first signed up and read the FEC rules that I have to abide by to run this campaign, how lax, how free flow, and how simple they are written because they were written by politicians for themselves.
Yeah.
My treasurer, he's like, Jim, this is got to be wrong. We had a lawyer like it. We're like, are you serious? This is what they say? The rules they make for themselves, unbelievable, and that needs to change. So getting money out has got to be the big thing. So, a good step that I thought was when people are running for an office, they can pull a salary equal to their old salary or the office they're running for, whichever is lower. So, a lot of people it costs a lot of money to run for an office, and it's going to disincentivize most Americans. I don't, you know, I don't believe that there's, you know, especially at the federal level, there's maybe the top 10% economy wise can afford to do it, unless they're very well backed by a bunch of grassroots organizations, and that's tough to do, you know, because now you're spending more time at that. So I would love to see campaign finance reform. I would love to see, you know, caps, or the Mera dollar, or vote dollars is one people suggest, you know, where everybody gets a blah, blah, blah. Understanding that different markets are going to be different. You know, it costs a lot more to run a commercial in New York City than it does in, you know, Taunton, Massachusetts. So,
yeah, I think frankly, those later parts are some of the more important to me, because I think I 100% agree with you that we should be trying to overturn Citizens United. However, it feels like a much more daunting task as a first step, being that it kind of requires either us to get a wholesale rebalancing of the Supreme Court, or we're going to need to have a constitutional amendment to overrule that. And so to me, I've always taken that latter approach of we need to be putting more good money in, because if we simply get money that's like corporate influence out of politics, you know, frankly, that still doesn't make it easier for that working class individual to run, because as you acknowledge, it is expensive to run just in the first place, taking the time to full-time campaign. And so we have to put good money into it so there can be that balance. Otherwise, all you're going to have is people who have accrued savings and can afford to run being the ones that run, even if you take corporate money out. So I love to hear that you also are including these ideas like democracy dollars as well. One thing I wanted to ask you, you know, now that you've been on the campaign trail for how long? When did you start the campaign? How long?
Started June of 19.
June of 19. So it's been now roughly
officially started. That was our, you know,
yeah,
we were
so
working on it
like
before
14
that.
to 15 months at this point. And so I have to ask you, you know, what has been the biggest thing that you've been learning from voters? Like something that has changed from the beginning of your campaign to now. What have you learned the most from the voters that you've gotten to talk to?
Well, I think healthcare is the biggest change for me. I don't know, maybe not the biggest change. That's not the right wording for it, but I've learned so many more personal stories about people, children with disabilities, people who are in accidents, people with, um, you know, sick loved ones, and it goes on, that it became a bigger and bigger issue for me, because I mean, again, I thought it was a big issue because it affected me directly, but through the past year and change, you know, it always comes up any of the town halls we have, and it comes up, and there's always a personal story. And you know, I put my email out there. I answer the messages on Facebook. It's me. I actually do that, and people are telling me these heartbreaking stories. And you know, we see people end up, you know, just to hear in Brevard, end up homeless because his wife got sick and died. You know, she got cancer. He lost everything trying to pay for the medical bills to keep her alive. She lost her fight, unfortunately, and now he's homeless. I mean, that's how, you know, it's heartbreaking, and it's more common than I thought it was. So for me, this healthcare issue has become an even bigger part of my campaign, a bigger focus than I originally thought it was. And that's where my stance on it
made you change from that kind of Medicare for all who want to a universal style. Was it simply hearing those stories, or was there like a specific moment that made you realize you needed to do more for healthcare?
COVID definitely, you know, at the beginning of the year, I mean, I was starting to lean a little bit more towards the Medicare for all, hate the name, side.
Yeah.
But when COVID came out and we started seeing these just obvious examples and politicians having to fight just to get people taken care of, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, as an engineer, every little piece of data builds up. But when it came to that, and I saw how people were so divided, and people are nasty about it, I'm like, this is wrong. This shouldn't be an argument. You know, it's such a complicated issue. What do they say? It's so complicated. Only 32 out of 33 developed nations have figured it out. You know,
yeah, it's super complicated.
Yeah, it's just, And there's so many models that do work. We can take the time, sit back and look and learn from them. I shouldn't say we shouldn't take the time. We've had the time to sit back and look. We know it works. We know it can be done. We need to step forward and do that. And this COVID, the coronavirus has been a perfect example of why we need that.
Yeah, I think that's so right. It's not a radical idea. It's just a cosmopolitan idea. When
Mm-hmm.
you have 32 out of the other 33 nations having universal health care, I think we can do it. America is great enough to be able to get universal health care.
Yeah.
So, Jim, I have only one more question for you before we talk about how people can get potentially involved in your campaign. My final question for you is I wanted to ask you, how do you try to make communication with your constituents, and how will you hopefully try to do that in the future if you are to be elected as well? I think it's very important that you stay in contact to be able to represent the people. How do you try to achieve that?
I'll answer the second part first. When elected, we already have a plan. We're going to be holding at least 2 town halls a month. Now, I have a very large geographic area, so they will be alternating between them. But to steal from college professors, I'm going to have office hours. I'm going to have open hours weekly for people to call in. Now that we all see that Zoom or whatever one we're on right now, it's very sorry. I didn't mean to plug the enemy. But we've seen that it can happen, and everybody's getting used to it now. So me and my staff, the senior staff, we would be there, and these will be some in the evening hours, some in the daytime hours. So anybody and will have the ability to reach us and listen to us. And will every idea be good? No. And will all my ideas be good? No. But we're going to work on it, and we're going to keep continuing to tweak it as we go. For the first part of the question, how we're doing it now, as anybody, if you talk to anyone that's running this campaign, a campaign in this season, whether they're the incumbent, this is their first time, or their 100th time. Boy, if it was their 100th time, that'd be pretty old by now. It is getting everybody to look for new ways. The old methods, the big town halls where everybody comes together, and in these days would just not be good. So we're doing a lot more digital outreach. We're being more approachable as our office. Come and see us, but we're all in masks. Please be masked. We'll go to these smaller events. We're doing more touchless door knocking. Where you knock and then you can, for the touchless canvassings, no contact canvassing. Much more phone banking than we have text banking, and obviously social media. I'm not the most savvy at it, but I think we're trying to get our message out. And I think the simplest thing is I respond to people. I respond. I read the messages. I mean, yeah, I get a lot of hate mail. I get a lot of threats. There are people that really just hate me for being whatever I am. So just kind of thanks, tweet, and move on. But I am just a regular person, and I want to hear from people, and people are responding to that here.
Yeah, and Jim, to your credit, for the people that end up on this program, yeah, they've definitely listened if they can get this way. So I really appreciate you taking the time with us today. For those that enjoyed hearing you talk about your vision for this country and what you're doing in your campaign, how can they get involved and be able to help out?
Well, obviously, our website, our main website is www.kennedyforflorida, spelled out for, because I'm not a millennial, .com. I'm a Gen Xer, so I actually still spell everything out. I'm just teasing. I love millennials. Don't get me wrong. JK, the number 4 Florida, or at JK4 Florida is our Twitter. And then we have an Instagram account too, Kennedy for More. So obviously we need donations. We are running a grassroots campaign. We know times are tough, and it is coming close to the line, but we are against a very well-funded candidate. And he is ducking everything. He will not do a debate. So reaching out and just getting the word out. If you follow us on any of the platforms, share it with your friends, because I really do believe that this could be the way to start a change in government, to start a change in Washington. And it takes the people, and the more people we have, the better the chance we have. We can reach out, we can talk, and I want to hear ideas from other parts of the country, because we don't, if you only listen to Florida politicians, you never need a snowplow.
Mm.
So
Yeah, that's actually a very good point of view. We do need all those perspectives from around the country. So, Jim, I want to thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
thank you for
It's a
having me.
pleasure as always, and we look forward to hopefully keeping in touch with you as the campaign progresses.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode of The Hill of Roses. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you did, please let us know by liking today's video and sharing it with your friends. If you want to be notified of whenever a new video drops, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Finally, if you want to find more of our network's content, please go to thehillofroses.com. We have a ton of articles and comics being developed by our team. With that being said, we love y'all for helping us make this movement grow. And as always, we hope you are staying rosy out there.